Mendami seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies? One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates.
Bill Maher is taking direct aim at Democratic Socialists, and he's not pulling any punches. The outspoken host unloads on the movement, accusing it of dragging the party toward a risky socialist shift while trying to reshape the country in the process. The tone sharp, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Buckle up, this one gets intense.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're Democratic Socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Maher wastes no time going after Bernie Sanders, one of the most prominent voices behind Democratic Socialism. Sanders has long championed single-payer healthcare as the fix to America's system. But Maher points to Vermont, a deeply blue state where it should have worked as a reality check. Instead, the plan collapsed under rising costs and complexity. To Maher, that failure isn't just local, it's a warning. The idea may sound great on stage, but in practice, it struggles to hold together.
White people sometimes, I think, question some of what you're saying. This is a survey student loan forgiveness recipients. 73% of applicants say they are likely to spend their extra money on non-essential, including vacations, smartphone, drugs, and alcohol. They admitted that to the pollster.
Who is this pollster?
NBC News. 52% they are very likely to buy new clothing. 46% they would use the money for vacation and eat out at restaurants. This is why people have a thing about, I would never call it free money, like I said.
Maher also calls out what he sees as a pattern. When faced with tough data, Sanders often questions the source. Fair enough, that's part of debate. But Maher argues the bigger issue is that many of those sources reflect what voters already believe. They still prefer capitalism. In his view, people value control, incentives, and the ability to shape their own outcomes. Handing out benefits without structure, he argues, can lead to short-term thinking over long-term growth. That's where idealism runs into human nature.
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland, but then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chávez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a mess. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest.
There, Maher shifts into warning mode. He argues socialism isn't just theory, it's been tested. He points to Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea as examples where heavy state control coincided with economic struggles and limited freedoms. Venezuela's collapse, Cuba's stagnation, and North Korea's isolation all serve, in his view, as cautionary tales. The message, outcomes often look very different from promises.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more.
Maher then adds nuance. He acknowledges the U.S. already blends capitalism with safety nets programs designed to keep people from falling behind. But he warns that balance is key. Push too far, and you risk undermining innovation and ambition. He paints a stark scenario: more government control, fewer choices, and supply struggling to meet demand. In that world, everyday life could mean waiting in long lines for basic goods systems stretched beyond its limits.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
At his core, Maher defends a simple idea: efforts should pay off. He argues capitalism's appeal isn't just wealth, it's incentive and ownership. His question is blunt: why should those who take risks and build something carry more of the burden? Lean too heavily on redistribution, he warns, and motivation starts to fade. In his view, overcorrecting doesn't create fairness, it risks slowing everything down.
Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal! You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that again.
Then comes the political warning. Maher argues that if Democrats don't distance themselves from the more hardline socialist wing, 2028 could get rough. Elections, he says, are won in the middle, not at the extremes. If voters start seeing policies as out of touch or overly complicated, the backlash could be real. For Maher, it's about perception as much as policy, and right now, that perception may be shifting.
This election is taking place when we have an administration in Washington which every day is moving us toward an authoritarian society.
This is America, New York City. Don't let them tell you any different. Don't let them tell you that we are the exception. We are the rule. And we set the bar for America. I'm talking to you, Donald Trump.
Let our words ring out so loud tonight that Andrew Cuomo can hear them in his $8,000 a month apartment. New York is not for sale.
Points to figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders as leading voices pushing the movement forward. Their success in places like New York City has energized others to follow the same path. But Maher argues that what works in a deep blue city doesn't always translate nationwide. Treating local wins as a national blueprint, he suggests, could be a risky bet.
Now, Amendami seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
Contrast that with Abigail Spanberger, who took a more moderate route in Virginia. By distancing herself from democratic socialism, she appealed to independents and centrists, and it paid off. Maher sees this as proof that different strategies win in different places. The danger comes when one approach is treated as universal.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong. Moving to the center is the way to win.
In the end, Maher frames it as a clash between vision and reality. By targeting figures like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, he's highlighting what he sees as a growing shift toward ideas that sound compelling but may not hold up under pressure. From Vermont's policy struggles to international examples, he argues there's a pattern worth watching. His bottom line is simple: balance matters. Ignore that, and the political cost could be steep.